The UN belongs to all of us, and Africa has done its share. Look at your own country, Nigeria. You know, the history, we don't talk about Nigeria stabilizing Liberia and Sierra Leone.
Yes.
Through deploying ECOMOG.
Yes. And funding.
And funding it.
Yes.
I think the question, is we need to really address ourselves. If the world is washing itself away, should we fold our hands? No. Nigeria did it. We can do it by addressing our peacekeeping needs. We can keep on shaming and naming, but doing stuff. I think there is a need for African leaders, and the debate is already coming up. What can we do for ourselves?
Definitely. I mean, as you said, Nigeria did it with ECOMOG in Sierra Leone and Liberia, but also, very importantly, Nigeria also helped support the FPLA in Angola, and also chaired the anti-apartheid committee here in the UN, and supported the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa.
Absolutely.
So Nigeria has had this history of trying to support its neighbors, and particularly across sub-Saharan Africa.
And we need Nigeria's leadership. African Union is as good again as its member states. So we need to build on their vision and make sure it's funded. It also responds to needs of, realistically to the needs of the continent, both peace and security, development, so that it can be respected globally. And it is respected, but we need to fund it and, fight really terrorism, Al-Shabaab and others. So we have also done it in South Sudan. So the question is commitment, political will, that when we stabilize an African country, it is economically beneficial to the whole region. I mean, let's start as a sub-region, ECOWAS, SADC. You have to, I don't encourage hegemonies, as in the sense of Nigeria and South Africa, but also countries that can take a lead. Look at Rwanda, what they have done in Mozambique.
Well, if we look at the DRC, SADC pulled out of the DRC and, alleged that Rwanda did not. If you look at ECOWAS, we have 3 countries that have left ECOWAS. So, we're speaking about African unity, and Africa has to work together. If we look at the crisis in Eastern DRC, SADC did go there and they pulled out. And if we look at ECOWAS, 3 countries have pulled out, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and they formed their own sub-regional bloc, the AES, the Alliance of Sahel States. Do you think that Africa might be moving in the wrong direction at this point?
No. I think there can be uncoordinated movement of troops, if I may use that word, and regionalism really should be anchored in reality of what is going on. I mean, look at the principles of African Union and ECOWAS when it comes to unconstitutional change of government, to, coups. But we need to really take a step back. When we did those charters, I mean, some coups are really not coups unconstitutional. They reflect the reality on the ground. We need to be flexible in the way we address. It shouldn't be like not knee-jerk reaction, okay. Like applying the rules because something has happened. If there is a coup in country X, I mean, we should really be able to do an analysis and say, what is going on there? But just suspending a country for the sake of it, I mean, what I see from a distance in West Africa, in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, is that there was a reality on the ground. The so-called elected leaders and what, there was a problem. And these coups were organic from the community. And I think, of course, ECOWAS had to apply the rules. I'm not criticizing ECOWAS, they had to apply the rules, but now I'm sure there is reflection. Then, when it comes to peacekeeping operations, like you mentioned South Africa and SADC in DRC, I think it was not a neat job. I think they should, DRC is both SADC and ESC. You remember there was an ESC force in DRC?
Yes.
I think there was no coordination between the 2 bodies. And these organizations, this architecture, the African Peace and Architecture, is new, it's fairly new. It's work in progress, we keep on perfecting it. I think that's where the crisis was. You found ECOWAS going head to head with the ESC, because that's the neighborhood of the East African community. But what I like is that for the first time, this year there was a joint summit. Joint summit, the first one between EAC and SADC, and they addressed the situation in DRC, Eastern DRC at the heads of state level and really worked out a mechanism of coordination. I think what we need is coordination. But we have no choice. We have to address this crisis. Yeah.
We do. And, when we look at some of these things, because you did say that some of these things appear organic, but some people also feel that it is still foreign powers meddling in African affairs. That is, we're dealing with foreign powers coming into Africa, particularly when it comes to our resources that do not necessarily benefit our nations but are extracted, exploited, and taken somewhere else. Do you think that we are still dealing in some ways with neocolonialism?
Absolutely, in different shapes and forms. I think the foreigners will always be there to take advantage of the continent. But this is why we need institutions like sub-regional bodies, or even strong states. What remains constant is a need for a strong continent. And I'm sure you're from Nigeria. I'm sure Nigeria needs a peaceful West Africa and a peaceful Africa. And then leaders have to respond out of even self-interest to that reality, that if you need a strong, peaceful, prosperous continent, leadership in countries like Nigeria and others have to invest in that. Invest in terms of diplomacy, in terms of peacekeeping and peacemaking. I think you have no choice. Look at your own banks across the continent. Look how countries like Nigeria, but you have to invest. I think there needs to be a reflection among current leaders on the continent. And I think we have an institution called the African Union. It really provides good founding documents. What is needed is to leaders to pay attention to that and lead.
Do you think it's harmful that Nigeria, because Nigeria currently doesn't have diplomats, I don't think we have a representative at the UN currently.
I'm not going to really, I'm a diplomat. I don't speak about other countries.
But I'm saying, are you missing us?
Yes, we do. We know where I would want every African country to be. The countries send their best here.
Yes.
And Nigeria has a history. Bande, who was my colleague, Professor Bande, we presented credentials the same day. He rose to lead us. He became the president of the General Assembly. Before him, Joy Ogo, she led on the Security Council. Nigerian diplomats have led. We cannot afford a vacuum of Nigeria not, having an ambassador here at the UN, because we work as an African group. Let me tell you, we have the numbers. You mentioned that I chaired the group of 77, 134 countries, and now I'm chairing NAM. The entire Global South, I've had a privilege of. But let me tell you, among NAM G77, Africa has the majority. And, if Africa is not effective in those Global South forums, it weakens our position. And of course, at the UN, the entire UN. Yeah. When the African group catches the cold, everybody sneezes in New York. But we need ambassadors. We need strong colleagues that can push African common positions. And we talk about South-South cooperation, even economically. Let me tell you, South-South cooperation, he is now a real option when it comes to funding for development. The traditional partners are pulling out, but we can really pull resources from the Global South. Look at Southeast Asia. $6.5 trillion economies, and they want to work with Africa.
It's, as you said, the traditional funders are pulling out, but it seems that the world has shifted completely. It's not just East versus West anymore. You have a lot of middle powers, even in Asia, as you said, the Arab countries. Do you think Africa is rising to the occasion in this multipolar world order?
Absolutely, that's a fantastic question. I think people say, you are the chair of NAM, how do you respond to this? Yeah. I always say that now we should change it to all aligned. Because we need to be strategic. We need to deal with all the partners. Yeah. We have to define our interests. If our interest is development and infrastructure and peace and security, we need to deal with whoever, the Americans, the Europeans, the Asians, whoever can address our interests. So we need to be flexible. And I think we are not yet there, but Africa needs to do that. So I think Africa, to really survive this, multipolar world, We need to really be strategic and deal with whoever, and deal with them as Africa, not as individual countries. Otherwise, if you deal with them as individual countries, they will tear us apart one by one. One voice will be respected.